Diamond P Sports presents from the National Hot Rod Association, Championship Drag Racing. This is Raceway Park near Englishtown, New Jersey. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClellan, and Diamond B Sports is on hand for the coverage of the 14th annual Summer Nationals. Working with me today is Steve Evans, and Steve, we've got quite a race on our hands.
Especially in Top Fuel, Dave, where all eyes will be on this lady, three-time Top Fuel world champion Shirley Muldowney. She won the opening race of the season, but then has fallen on hard times, not able to match the elapsed times of this man, Gary Beck, the quickest in the world of Top Fuel racing. Beck has already won 2 events this year and has a substantial point margin towards the title.
And Steve, unique as it may seem, Gary Beck did not qualify in the number 1 position here. That was reserved for Richard Tharp. We're in the first round of racing right now, and a second-generation drag racer in the far lane, that's young Scott Coletta. Here in the near lane in the jet black dragster is Johnny Abbott.
Well, Scott Coletta, only 20 years of age. This is his first season on the full-time Top Fuel Tour. He participated in the Sportsman Eliminators before that. Johnny Abbott, well, he was there at the first ever U.S. Nationals back in '55, but has not been very active this year and could be a bit rusty. Staged and ready, and first off the mark is Scott Coletta. Abbott has problems. Coletta has problems. A big break for Scott Coletta, as Johnny Abbott was the first to be problem-plagued, Dave.
Sure was, and as Scott Coletta slows to a halt, his elapsed time at 6.88 seconds certainly is not indicative of his performance potential. Something going wrong with the car. The same for Johnny Abbott. Back on the starting line, we hear our next pair fired in this first round of Top Fuel eliminations. And Steve, it is the first generation of the Coletta racing team.
You bet. It's Connie Coletta, Ypsilanti, Michigan, here in the near lane. The first driver ever in NHRA Championship drag racing to go over 200 miles an hour, and his opponent is Denver Schutz from California.
Sure is, and Denver Schutz is a raisin grower by trade, but he teamed up with Mark Danikus and is fielding one of the more competitive West Coast cars that's made this long trip back here to Englishtown, New Jersey. Denver Schutz driving the Raisin Express.
Denver was one of the original members of Traeger's 5-second club a number of years back, but then took some 5 years out of the cockpit and has been a bit rusty. Had some red light problems earlier at the Spring Nationals this year.
And for Connie Coletta, his first major NHRA championship win came at the Winter Nationals way back in 1964. He is still very active. He's now fielding the 2 cars. You saw his son just a moment ago. He advanced to the second round, and a great start for Connie Coletta. He is pulling out ahead of Denver Schutz, and Coletta takes the win.
Dave Coletta clocks a winning elapsed time of 5.81 seconds at 244 miles an hour. We saw some smoke coming out of the Denver Schutz power plant at half track. He was burning pistons, the engine expiring early. No way he was going to match wheels with Coletta's 581.
On the starting line, Steve, is some of that Texas thunder that everybody has been talking about in the nitro burning classes. This is the low qualifier in the far lane, Richard Tharp, driving for Kilpatrick and Cannell. They hail from Dallas, Texas, while his competition comes from San Antonio, and a nice guy by the name of Jody Smart.
Yes, he is. In fact, quite a contrast here personality-wise. The very flamboyant Richard Tharp, the very soft-spoken, gentlemanly Jody Smart. Now, we're looking at Tharp Hill, Kirkpatrick, and Cannell, the team. He was a low qualifier at a very nice 5.60. Everyone quite surprised, as we mentioned earlier, that Gary Beck didn't show in his 550s or 540s, for that matter. Jody Smart has been runner-up so many times and has still not yet gotten into that NHRA winner's circle, but he never quits trying.
You got to keep trying, and it looks like something may be wrong over on Richard Tharp's car. The crew beginning to gather around the car. Starter Buster Couch goes over, and it looks like Richard is getting out of the car. And in addition to being flamboyant, he sometimes can get just a bit upset. And Tharp getting out of the Kilpatrick and Cannell car. Don't know yet what's wrong.
We get word from the starting line, Dave, that there was oil leaking out of the snout on the front of the blower. Now, the blower really doesn't hold that much oil, but starter Buster Couch, being very cautious here, didn't want any of that on Richard's tires.
And on that shot you saw just then of Jody Smart's car, you can see that supercharger, snout as you call it, is right behind the driver's head, encased in that roll cage. So he can't know what's going on. It all has to be relayed to him. So a big break here in round number 1. Jody Smart smokes the tires off the starting line, but Jody is going after a low ET of a 583.
That is amazing, Dave. As hard as he smoked the tires, losing traction about 50 feet out, still a 583. And how about the speed? 251 miles an hour for Jody Smart, who goes into round number 2.
And, of course, the important thing being the elapsed time, because the lane choice in the next round will go to the racer with the lower elapsed time from the previous round. And Jody Smart, with a tire smoking run that everybody had given up on except him, ran a fine 583.
The lady from Virginia, Allison Lee, primes the injector on the supercharged nitro-burning engine in the Jim and Allison Lee car from the Plains, Virginia. Their driver, Butch Osmond, idled forward towards the burnout area.
The Jim and Allison Lee team, Steve, has been in drag racing for quite a number of years. They are a true lady and gentleman of the sportsman category, as you would refer to horsemen, which they also have got a vested interest in thoroughbred horses. But their love is drag racing, and they have proven it many times over. Their latest driver, a fine one, Butch Osmond out of the state of Ohio.
I'll tell you, Allison Lee's not afraid to break a fingernail working on the motor. Their opponent here, and here's a guy that is red hot, Joe Amato. As the emergency crew is still out there making sure there's no debris after Tharp's burnout. In fact, a little fuel leaking out of Amato's car. I believe that's what they're cleaning up. An awful lot of cars will do that. It kind of comes out of the overflow. Both this man, Butch Osmond, and Joe Amato, veterans formerly of the Alcohol Dragster Wars. Butch has been as far as runner-up in national event competition, but Joe Amato, the fellow in the far lane, got his first taste of victory on the big-time tour just a couple of weeks ago in Montreal, Canada, winning the NHRA Grand Nationals.
Steve, both of these cars could be considered husband and wife teams. Joe and Jerry Amato for the bright red car, and the yellow machine of Jim and Allison Lee. Their driver is Butch Osmond. A lot of concentration going into the starting principles here. The light beams across the track indicating to the drivers when they are in the proper spot, when they are staged. Then starter Buster Couch will throw the switch, and the tree goes green, and a red light for Butch Osmond. He streaks through the quarter mile, but it does him no good at all. He left too soon, left the big red light showing on the starting line, and Joe Amato advances to round number 2.
You'd have to say here that Butch Osmond gave that race away to this man, Joe Amato, because as hard as Joe Amato smoked the tires, he lost traction so very early, it's doubtful he could have recovered even to match the 627 for Osmond. So Osmond, who cuts that tree very closely all the time, this time was just a little bit too alert.
Our next pair of cars coming up in the first round of Top Fuel Eliminator, and this is Dick LaHaye out of Lansing, Michigan, sitting in front of some 2,500 horsepower with those huge 18-inch wide slick tires, trying for the traction necessary to give him the win in this first round of racing. And he's got a tough chore because he is taking on the car that has been the quickest in the world all season long. He has been into the 540s, and this is Gary Beck from El Toro, California.
The racers call this machine the Blue Rocket, Dave, and it's aptly described. Owned by Larry Miner, a rancher, potato farmer in Hemet, California, it is really something to watch. And speaking of the feminine side into the Top Fuel sport, Dick LaHaye, when his son quit crewing for him, he hired his daughter. And this lady can take that engine apart as well as any guy in the pits.
Steve, you've spent a lot of time in the pits this weekend, and that's just plain hard work. A girl doing this kind of work?
Oh, well, she transports the car from race to race. LaHaye flies in or drives in his passenger car. In fact, she does everything now except tune the motor, and that's up to Dick. And tune the motor, Gary Beck can do as well. There's a lot of bells and whistles on this car. Levers and high-speed lean-outs and all kinds of fuel control things that a lot of drivers wouldn't be able to handle in that short 5 seconds. Gary Beck can do it, and that's part of their secret.
Well, the secret now is who's going to get the best start. It's Gary Beck and Dick LaHaye. Summer Nationals, drag racing at its finest. Both cars now into the staging beams, a green light, and Beck smokes the tires, but he's ahead.
The biggest problem for Beck is overpowering a racetrack. Now he's burning pistons, but still, Gary Beck has enough raw horsepower to pull it off at a 572, an amazing elapsed time considering all the problems. 238 miles an hour. And I'll tell you, Dick LaHaye was there all the way to 585, 239 miles an hour. A lot of work is going to take place between this round and the next in the Gary Beck pits.
When you talk about all the levers that a man has to pull in the high-speed lean-outs, referring, of course, to the fuel distribution system. And if one little thing could go wrong, possibly it did on that run, as you saw the smoke coming out from the burned piston.
All right, we're ready for more competition. One of the best drivers from Southern California, Dwight Salisbury. The car owned by Earl Whiting, based in Aberdeen, Washington. That's Big Earl in the black shirt, as Salisbury smokes the tires on the burnout. They barely qualified this car. They have been struggling. They made it into the number 16 spot, and their competition is David.
The bright pink machine with one name on it, and that is Shirley. Down at the far end, Gary Beck getting out and looking over a very oily situation down there as the motor expired going through the trap. But Shirley Muldowney is the reigning world champion. She is the three-time world champion, the only person ever to win more than one Top Fuel World Championship title.
And in past years, Shirley has been behind at this stage in the season, Dave, and this is generally where she likes to make her move. Start winning more and more rounds, start getting into the winner's circle. Salisbury looks over to see where the pink car is, doesn't want to stage until Shirley does. Here are two of the best levers in all of drag racing as far as starting line reaction.
Do you find a driver like Dwight Salisbury, Steve, reacting to the fact that he just barely made the show? Does it put extra pressure on him?
Yeah, it does. They're not overloaded with spare parts and pieces. The thing that puzzles this team is that they can run very well at high altitude. At 6,000 feet, they can run quicker elapsed times than sea level, and they don't know why.
And that is very unusual because at sea level is when the engine should theoretically put out the ultimate in horsepower. Dwight Salisbury, Shirley Muldowney locked into first round competition at the Summernationals. A lot of concentration, a lot of thought going into the start. Salisbury up in smoke, and behind that cloud, as you can see, Shirley is way ahead.
Well, Gary Beck down at the far end won't mind seeing a little smoke out of the pipes on the pink car either. She's going to have some work to do. Dwight Salisbury smoking the tires that hard, Dave. You wonder if they didn't try to make up for their loss of horsepower with the clutch and have much too tight a clutch and just overpowered the racetrack with the clutch.
And when you see the tires go up in smoke instantly, it indicates that the 2,500 horsepower is being applied directly to the tire and to the track, and the traction just wasn't there to hold it. Our next pair of cars back on the starting line is a former competition eliminator racer, and that is down into the sportsman category of competition. He used to run a little Chevrolet-powered Econorail. Then he moved up to an alcohol dragster, and right now in the near lane, qualified in this double tough field, is Jim Head.
Well, the biggest surprise in qualifying, Dave, had to be this car called the New Englander. It is Bob Simmons of Ellington, Connecticut, who will be racing Jim Head. It's a surprise because that was a Donovan power plant in Simmons' car that has not been competitive for a number of years, and apparently the strain of qualifying has caught up with him. He has lost fire. It's a single for Jim Head.
And Jim Head is not backing off in the least. He wants the elapsed time that may give him the lane choice, and he does very well with a 5.86 second elapsed time at 236 miles an hour. When we talk about elapsed time, we're talking about the amount of time it takes to cover 1,320 feet from a standing start. An exact measured quarter-mile distance is the length of the racing surface in championship drag racing. And within those 1,320 feet, Steve, it looks like Jim Head may have lost a few pistons on that one.
That's almost routine these days, Dave. The competition is so tough. If you don't have any oil or burned pistons, it's abnormal anymore. Here is the real veteran in the field. As far as the number of years racing are concerned, it's got to be Gene Snow, the snowman from Fort Worth, Texas, who literally invented the professional funny car as we know it today. Speaking of funny cars, they'll be along just a little later in our show. But this is Snow, the black gold car.
His competition is another of the East Coast entries. As you see him approaching in the far lane, the water box, the water, the assist in the burnout procedure. The burnouts, of course, are done to heat up those huge tires. And when we say heat them up, we literally mean burn them. Now watch Gene Snow's car as he rolls forward to put more rubber down on the racing surface. The tires smoking, indicating that they are very hot, literally burning. We've had instances in years gone by of them actually catching fire when the headers were directed more toward the tire. But the rubber transferred to the racing surface gives them, and we got a problem, it looked like, Steve. It was Hank Endres headed down track like he could not stop.
Apparently had no reverse gear, Dave, and the rules now require that you back that car up under its own power. I think you're allowed to push it back, but if it won't come out of forward gear, there's no way that you're going to be able to do that. So Hank Endres, realizing his plight, just got it off the racetrack, to leave it for Gene Snow.
And leaving it for Gene Snow gives him the ideal situation. He now has to choose. Will he run the car hard, or will he just take a nice easy pass and try to save the parts and pieces? For Gene Snow, the veteran, I would have to think that he is going to take it kind of easy. Let's see. My guess was exactly right. He shuts it off a couple of 100 feet off the line and just coasts through. You see no smoke, you see no oil, so Gene Snow knows that he hasn't cost some expensive parts on this run.
Well, there doesn't seem right now, Dave, to be any difference in the lanes, and you'd have to agree with Gene when you consider his opponent when we get to round number 2 is going to be Gary Beck, and he'll need all the parts and muscle he can manage to get around Beck. Also in round number 2, we'll be seeing Joe Amato versus Scott Coletta, Connie Coletta racing Jim Head from Ohio, and it'll be Texan Jody Smart up against Shirley Muldowney. That is going to be an excellent race when we get to Top Fuel round number 2. Gene Snow gliding to a stop, and he knows that at least his crew can relax. And next up, Dave, funny cars.
The fabulous fiberglass funny cars, the crowd favorites, no matter where you go. The funny cars, 16 of the best starting the first round of eliminations at the Summernationals. And this is the reigning world champion, Frank Hawley, driving the famed Chi-Town Hustler, Farconis Coil and Minnick, the owner, and Frank Hawley, the world champion, the driver.
He will be up against the beautiful orange and yellow machine in the far lane, and here is a youngster that has come along very strong since the early part of the season. This is Rick Johnson driving Fred Castronova's Custom Body Enterprises car from Utica, New York. Quite a crowd favorite here in the Northeast. Races on just about every good hot Saturday night in the summer at Raceway Park.
You can tell by the sound that the funny cars are powered by those same 2,500 horsepower nitro-burning engines. The thunder that comes from those engines producing the power. And it is an awesome amount of horsepower that is necessary to get these cars down a quarter of a mile in less than 6 seconds.
When you talk about the Chi-Town Hustler, Frank Hawley, you have to mention the word consistency. They picked up right where they left off, winning the first 3 races of the season. Rick Johnson, first to move in. Rick knows that the Chi-Town car will run 595, 594 all day long. He knows he has to run better than that, generally speaking.
And in a lot of cases, the competition to the Chi-Town Hustler finds it difficult to move up to the performance standards set by Hawley and crew. It is Johnson and Hawley off the mark together. At the finish line, it is Rick Johnson, and what an upset.
I think Frank Hawley was headed to victory at about the 1,000-foot mark. Dave, the motor went away, and instantly did the man right here, Rick Johnson, move a car length ahead. So Rick Johnson, a bit of an upset at 6:12. 236 miles an hour. I'm sure Frank Hawley was counting his round money here in the first round of racing.
Not only the round money, but the valuable points leading to the World Championship. Here is the man that is in hot pursuit. The brilliant blue car. Out of South Louisiana, the team of Candies and Hughes fielding a funny car this year instead of a Top Fuel dragster. Their driver is Mark Oswald. He previously drove the dragster last season, moved into the funny car this year, and is one of the strongest and fastest cars on the circuit. In fact, it was here 1 year ago that he won the Top Fuel Eliminator title. Rick Johnson getting out of the Custom Body Enterprises, and it looks like he's got some problems. The heat today is almost oppressive. Temperatures into the mid to high 90s, humidity in the 80s to 90% range, and sitting in one of those fire suits inside a funny car like Tom McEwen's Corvette, it can get very warm.
Tom McEwen, the opponent for the blue car here, Candies and Hughes. McEwen in the far lane doing his dry burnout, as does Mark Oswald. McEwen from Fountain Valley, California, has been racing, well, he's been drag racing since the sport was invented by old Pappy Hart in Santa Ana, California back in the early 50s. And McEwen this year really enjoying his best in a number of seasons from a performance standpoint. Has consistently been in the 590s and told me this morning, think upset, I feel good.
Well, he better feel awful good at this point as Mark Oswald drifts out towards the edge, but look at the horsepower. Right at the end of the quarter mile, Mark Oswald scoots by for the win, defeating Tom McEwen.
McEwen made the blue car use everything they had. A 588 wins it for Oswald to McEwen's 593, so he was in that race start to finish. Look at the speed on Candies and Hughes, 248 miles an hour. Mark Oswald winning here again in the first round as he did a year ago in their Top Fuel dragster.
And that has got to put some pressure onto Frank Hawley and the Chi-Town Hustler crew, because it means that Mark Oswald will continue into the second round and earn points as he goes. Next pair of cars backing up after the burnout in the near lane, the Jim Wimette Alan Aronek car with Tommy Anderson driving And in the far lane, Kenny Bernstein.
Kenny Bernstein, the Budweiser King car, now based in Southern California, a well-sponsored, very professional operation. But don't think this sport is strictly cubic money. You don't win on your wallet alone, as Tom Anderson here has proven so many times. Runner-up at the Winter Nationals, runner-up at another major race this year. Alan Aronek and Tom Anderson do miracles with very little backing and very few parts.
For Kenny Bernstein, a full crew awaiting him back at his 18-wheeler in the pits after he completes this run. If he wins, it is get to the motor, tear it apart, look inside, make sure everything is okay, put it back together. If he should happen to lose, it's probably the same routine getting ready for the next race. The staging procedure's underway, both cars inching very slowly to get just the right spot. Anderson up in smoke, he gets a little bit shaky, and it is Kenny Bernstein straight down the racetrack.
It is Kenny Bernstein rocking and rolling in that Mercury LN7 car using dual parachutes, and that is low elapsed time of the event for the funny car breed. A stunning 5.85 at 249 miles an hour. That's as fast, I believe, as Kenny Bernstein has ever gone, 249. But where did Louis T come from? He had not tipped that hand at all.
Steve, when you talk about a veteran of drag racing, here is Don the Snake Prudhomme. He is the winningest fuel dragster or funny car racer combined ever in the history of the sport.
His competition will be a guy from just right down the road, a neighbor in the San Fernando Valley of Southern California. That is Little John Lombardo. And quite a contrast between these two. You have the intense, dedicated Snake, four-time world champion. On the other hand, you have Lombardo, who does this strictly for fun, but does it so well. He was low qualifier this year at the Southern Nationals in Atlanta, Georgia.
And for Lombardo, he does not travel that much throughout the drag racing year. He spends most of his time racing on the West Coast, primarily in Southern California. You notice almost a total absence of sponsor names on the side of his car. He would prefer to go racing in his own style, at his own pace, and when he wants to do it.
Neil Motorwood's a Little John. If you got sponsors, you got to talk to him, be nice to him. He doesn't care, but he cares about beating the Snake. This is an old rivalry.
And he's on fire, going off the edge of the track. Lombardo pulls back onto the racing surface and brings the car to a safe halt. The dreaded terror of all funny car racers is a fire. You see the emergency hatch coming open as he is out in the grass, coming to a stop, and Little John Lombardo coming out of the car through the escape hatch in the roof.
Apparently got a connecting rod and put it through the side of the motor or out the oil pan, Dave. That's usually what would cause a fire like this, that intense, that quickly. A lot of oil under the tires. Lombardo did a wonderful job of keeping this car right side up. The safety safari team also doing their outstanding job, being there just as soon as he comes to a stop. He is just fine. Peeling off his fire suit, Don Prudhomme. Let's take another look.
And here he goes. The oil comes out of the engine. The fire begins. He hits the onboard fire extinguisher systems. The fire goes out. At this point, he goes through the traps, waiting until he passes the timing lights before he pulls off into the grass area here on the edge of the track surface at Raceway Park. So Little John Lombardo, A-OK.
And Prudhomme goes into round two. Mrs. John Force, backing up her talented husband, a full-time professional funny car driver, John Brute Force, also from Southern California. So important, that process of backing them up in the tracks in which they burned out. His opposition, his opponent, will be the beautiful Hawaiian Punch car, owned by Roland Leong and driven by Mike Dunn.
Mike Dunn, the runner-up here a year ago to Don Prudhomme in the funny car final. But right now, it's the first round of competition. 16 of the best funny cars in the world assembled for the Summer Nationals.
Mike Dunn, lucky to be here at all. He had an awful fire at the Spring Nationals, destroyed the car. This is the new Hawaiian, and it is a tremendous race until John Force simply out-muscles him on the far end at 601, 243 miles an hour to a losing 611. John Force has been runner-up at this event. That was 3 years ago, hoping to do at least that well today, and off to a good start.
A tenth of a second difference between the two cars, and you can see what a tenth of a second is at the finish line. It's like 4 or 5 car lengths, and we literally deal in tenths, hundredths, and even thousands of a second as dividing and separating the winning and losing entries.
Here is Dale Pulley, the beautiful Miller Warrior, another car out of Southern California, a very popular base for the pros due to the all-weather situation. But one guy who doesn't base himself in Southern California will be the opponent for this beautiful orange car, the Super Brute from Fabergé, Al Segrini from Easton, Massachusetts. This is his home track, and his home fans are here.
Segrini has tasted the winner's circle several times throughout his racing career, but he has got his work cut out for him as Dale Pulley and Mike Hamby in the Miller High Life Warrior field one of the strongest funny cars in existence. For years, they ran an engine no bigger than 426 cubic inches, said they needed no more than that. It would run almost 250 miles an hour. Why build the big one?
These are both 83 Trans Am bodied car, and either candidate for best appearing car of any drag race. Two state-of-the-art, absolutely beautiful professional funny cars. It's a good even lead. Segrini pulls out in the early going. It is Segrini all the way. Al Segrini defeats Dale Pulley. 5:96 the elapsed time at 247 miles an hour.
A 6:16 slowing for Dale Pulley as the Super Brute entry of Al Segrini now advances into round number 2, when there will only be 8 cars. In championship drag racing, it is a single elimination style of competition. First there are 16, then there are 8, then there are 4, and then there's 2.
Well, here's a guy that has been number 1 3 times in his career. Raymond Beadle in the Blue Max, the one car that could get the crowd on their feet at any drag race in any part of the country. And talk about your David and Goliath stories. The red car is Paul Smith, who didn't even try to qualify until the final session last night because he figured he only had enough parts for one qualifying run. And amazingly enough, Smith has done it again. Pulled off a miracle and got into the field.
Steve, one of the great problems of being a budget racer in this style of competition is, like in the first round for Paul Smith, he has to run the famed Schlitz Blue Max, and that's double tough because Beadle's got parts to burn. It doesn't matter to him if he should burn a few pistons. He can go back and replace them. For Paul Smith, he's got to win and also save the parts.
The amazing Raymond Beadle. Not only does he compete in the funny car rank, he has a NASCAR car, a sprint car. Paul Smith has what you see is what you get. That's his entire racing operation over there. A very dedicated man to this sport and a good friend of Raymond Beadle's. They're off right together. Raymond Beadle with a bit of a hole shot, actually. They are nose to nose. It is Raymond Beadle in the Blue Max.
And that hole shot paid off, Steve. Listen to the times. A 6:10 for Paul Smith. For Raymond Beadle, a 6:14. That means Smith actually ran the quarter-mile distance quicker, but Raymond Beadle, by virtue of leaving first, got there first at the finish line, even though he had a slower elapsed time.
So Paul Smith had that miracle within his grasp. Beadle didn't outdollar him. He outdrove him in this particular situation. And here we go, the last race in round 1 of funny car competition. That is car owner Larry Kugel removing the electric starter from the blower. The engine now running on the car he calls the Sting. A new driver for this season, Ron Correnti, a native of this very area from New Jersey.
And as you look underneath the upraised body of that fiberglass funny car, you see the tubular chassis, the motor sitting in front of the driver, the 2-speed transmission right under his feet. Ron Correnti has got a lot to think about just getting the car from start to finish. It's the problems that can occur that are also lurking in the back of his mind as he brings the Sting up into the water, then breaks the tires loose, and here comes the burnout. The tires heated to their maximum, and he will be backing up into his own tracks, he hopes, trying to find just the utmost of traction.
And his competition will be officially the fastest funny car in the world, the national record holder at 254 miles an hour, Ken Vinny out of Wadsworth, Ohio. Vinny is really an innovator, an inventor, actually. He builds his own superchargers and manifolds, capable of molding his own body. And for a guy who's only in his second year of nitro funny car competition, he has done amazingly well. 2 beautiful automobiles. On the near side is Correnti. In the far side, the Manhattan supply car of Ken Vinny, and they're off together.
Ken Vinny noted for the top speed out of that Corvette-bodied car, and it shows once again at over 245 miles an hour. Ken Vinny takes the measure of Ron Correnti. The elapsed times, 5:91 for Ken Vinny, a slowing 6:11 for Ron Correnti. Well, that wraps up the first round of competition in our fiberglass-bodied funny car. You know, Englishtown, New Jersey is located nearby to Raceway Park and set in the midst of a historical area. as the churches dating back into the 1700s, Englishtown itself as far back into the 1700s. Back in the Revolutionary War, Molly Pitcher's Well played a major part.
And David, a different kind of history will be set here today at the East's finest drag racing facility, Raceway Park, just outside of Englishtown, New Jersey. It's the 14th annual NHRA Summernationals Championship, and we are now ready for second round action in the Top Fuel Eliminator category. A beautiful but hot day and a capacity crowd once again.
When we talk about hot, it is temperatures up into the upper 90s with a high humidity level, and it's very taxing on these drivers as they sit in their fire suits encased in the roll cages waiting for their shot at the quarter mile.
Connie Coletta will be in the far lane up against this man, Jim Head. Both are survivors from round number 1. Head aspires someday to be a professional drag racer, but now supplements his income as a mechanical engineer based right outside of Columbus, Ohio. Has even tried a computer on board that car. This gentleman, Connie Coletta, a legend in the sport, and now operates a multi-million-dollar air freight service out of Detroit. A highly qualified jet pilot himself. Coletta in the far lane, Jim Head in the near lane, Dave McClellan.
By virtue of the previous round's times, the lane choice going to Connie Coletta, we have not noted thus far any difference but a red light. Jim Head tries to put a whole shot on Connie Coletta, and Coletta's engine having a lot of problems. Sparks coming out of it, generally indicating when they come out the bottom of the car that there's problems with the clutch. Coletta brings the car to a safe stop. He doesn't seem to be having any problems with it, but you can see a huge shower of sparks coming out of the back of the car. As we watch Jim Head leave, he left just a fraction of a second too soon. Left the red light on the starting line, automatically giving the win to Coletta. But now watch the back of Coletta's car. You start to see the sparks coming out. Little bits and pieces glowing out on the asphalt. And Coletta's car with lots of problems on this round. It's very lucky for him. His competition red-lighted because Coletta never would have won this race.
Those are titanium sparks, I do believe, Dave, as the clutch has exploded and is rattling around inside that protective bell housing. The bell housing doing its job in containing virtually all of it. And next to incinerate the tires for second round top fuel action is Joe Amato of Old Ford, Pennsylvania. Amato's been drag racing for about 16 years, but only the past 2 years as a pro. He operates a high-performance wholesale business in Old Ford. His wife, Jerry, is his right arm.
Racing against Joe Amato will be 20-year-old Scott Coletta. This is the second half of the Coletta Flying Services team, the second generation to race in Top Fuel Eliminator. Coletta will be in the far lane, Joe Amato in the near lane.
As they say in horse racing, Joe Amato broke his maiden just a few weeks ago at the Grand Nationals in Montreal. And once they win that first big one, it gives them a taste, David.
It sure does, Steve, and it seems to be the opportunity to go on to bigger things. But he's got to get past Scott Coletta, and he does it right at the finish line. A very close race. Coletta with a tremendous advantage off the line as Joe Amato smoked the tires. And when we say that, we mean he lost traction. Watch again.
This is very, very impressive. When you smoke the tires like this, that means the driver has to get off and on that throttle pedal, trying to get the car to hook up again. It's the big top-end charge that paid off for Amato, 250 miles an hour. They say speed means nothing in this sport, but it is an indicator that you have got some kind of horsepower. Scott Coletta, I'm sure, amazed himself as the red car thunders by.
And you talk about thunder, this is the man that can do it. He has run 5:40s. Just think, the quickest time we've seen here today has been in the 5:70s and 5:80s. Almost a half a second quicker has gone this man. Gary Beck driving for the car owner, Larry Miner. Beck calling El Toro, California home.
Gene Snow from Fort Worth, Texas. At one time was in the automobile business. For 10 years, he made his living drag racing funny cars, and now he races a Top Fuel car simply because he likes to.
He's having fun. He retired from the sport for a few years.
We have a problem. Gary Beck's crew inspecting the motor. It is still running, but there is a problem. There is a major problem, apparently, and they're trying to fix it right on the starting line. Occasionally, it can be done. As the car sits there, Beck is going to apparently move towards the starting line.
The engine's still running. Nobody told him to shut it off, so it must not be leaking any fluids. Gene Snow, coming back into the sport after forming his own oil company, is just having a lot of fun, but he's going to take everything he's got to beat Gary Beck, and Beck never leaves the starting line.
Well, you know what that tells you, Dave? He probably didn't have any oil pressure. That is generally the case. You stage and hope that the other driver red lights or crosses the center line. Gene Snow did not. Gene Snow goes into the semifinals at 5.98, and Gary Beck backs the car off the starting line under its own power. You're not going to hurt the engine at idle, but if you were to stand on that throttle, you're going to oil down a racetrack for the cars to come behind you. You've seen this so many times yourself, David. That's a good guess.
A tremendous amount of stress on the car and a tremendous amount on the driver as we look at Shirley Muldowney and her son, John.
John, how is it to work for an intense, competitive, professional race car driver who's also your mother?
Oh, it's pretty tough at times, Steve. As a matter of fact, yesterday we were just having a family discussion, as we call it, about certain things, and usually we just close the trailer door and work it out, and then when we come out, it's a new day.
John's learned a lot. He's grown up a lot the last few years, and we've all come of age, and it's a very, very hard business we're in. And as long as we treat it like a business and try to enjoy what we do, then I think we'll come out on top.
It's got to be a little strange, too, for a 25-year-old bachelor to take his newest girlfriend home to meet his mother, the race car driver.
Yeah, it is sort of tough. Her standards are pretty tough, so, it has to be the right person.
And you spend a lot of time together at the racetrack and away from it, months and months on the road. Do you share off-track interests with your mother?
Yeah, we, as a matter of fact, just before this race, we just came from Vermont, and we fished in Lake Champlain, and we had quite a time up there. So we do a lot of things together besides race.
This young man and his mother have both got to be happy that Gary Beck is out of competition because he is currently leading the Winston World Championship points chase, but Shirley, the reigning world champion, is in hot pursuit.
That's right, Dave McClellan. If Shirley can get the win light over this guy, Jody Smart from San Antonio, Texas, she'll pick up at least 200 points on Gary Beck. Jody Smart, one of the best-liked men in this business. Soft-spoken, always willing to lend a hand or lend a part, even to this lady.
For Shirley Muldowney, this will be her chance to advance in that Winston World Championship point standing. She's the reigning world champion. She wants to repeat. Jody Smart has yet to win his first national event title, but it is Smart out first. He appears to be lengthening his lead, and by several car lengths, Jody Smart takes the win. Listen to the times, 5.74 seconds. One of the quickest runs all day to a losing 5.87 for Shirley Muldowney. But the speed for Smart, over 251 miles an hour. As Jody gets out of his car, he knows he won the race. Shirley was nowhere close as they crossed the finish line. And Shirley, she's sort of reflecting back on the loss.
Shirley Muldowney congratulating Jody Smart down here at the end of the racetrack. They've raced probably a dozen times, and just a few weeks ago did Jody finally beat her for the very first time.
Back on the starting line, the crowd favorite funny cars getting set for their second round of competition. We're down to 8 cars remaining. Here is Vini's vet out of the Manhattan Supply Company, racing against John Force. Vini will be in the far lane. He's a former Southern Californian moving into the Ohio area a few years ago and moving last year into the nitro car.
John Force is one of the hardest working drag racers off the racetrack. He lets his crew take care of the race car. John's out attending to business, and you see the results of that. Many, many sponsors on this beautiful Pontiac Trans Am automobile. So it's John Force in the near lane up against Ken Vinny. Vinny driving a car of his own manufacture, the official national speed record holder. John Force moves first. A noticeable hole shot by John Force. It is Force.
Boy, that is a race decided by a matter of inches as Ken Vinny. Watch now as we go back and look again. Force's car moves dramatically ahead of the car of Ken Vinny. And as they progress down the quarter mile, Force with the advantage. The car beginning to lose a little traction. You see it moving on the track. Now, Vinny at this point appears to be ahead. But as they hit the finish line, the broad yellow stripe, it is John Force in the win.
Moving along in round number 2 of funny car competition, it is Don the Snake Prudhomme. Now Prudhomme here in this round has drawn Raymond Beadle in the blue Max.
Between Raymond Beadle out of Dallas, Texas, and Don Prudhomme, they accounted for 7 consecutive years of Winston World Championship titles. Apparently Beadle has problems. Prudhomme in the Pepsi Challenger just takes a short burst off the starting line, then shuts it off. Steve, what could have happened to Beadle?
Well, Dave McClellan, checking with NHRA's competition department, we find that, you talk about bad luck, you know how low these cars are? Well, there's a little bump where they come out of the staging lanes out to line up for their burnout and race. Apparently that bump was just high enough and the Blue Max was just low enough to punch a hole in the oil pan. Oil ran all over the pavement. There was no time. Prudhomme was already started to do anything about it. Here's your low qualifier, Mark Oswald, the Candies and Hughes car.
Mark Oswald out of Ohio, moving down to the home base of Houma, Louisiana, and taking over the driving chores of the Candies and Hughes car. From the East Coast, from Easton, Massachusetts, is the Super Brute entry of Al Segrini. The Fabergé car, winner of Best Appearing Car in many competitions, as could the Candies and Hughes car. Both state-of-the-art examples of what a good-looking funny car should resemble.
Mark Oswald won his first major funny car title 2 weeks ago in Canada. Al Segrini won earlier this year at the Cajun Nationals in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They are set and ready. Segrini appeared to move first, but look at the muscle in the blue car.
Muscle is what he has at the end of the racetrack as the Candies and Hughes car with Mark Oswald records a 5:92 elapsed time, a speed of 249 miles an hour, plus just a heartbeat away from 250 miles an hour. The Bud King, the body coming down on the Mercury LN7 of Kenny Bernstein. Hailing from Dallas, Texas, he started a chain of restaurants, sold them, and got into the professional race business and done very well.
And he is up against Rick Johnson, who started his drag racing career at the age of 18 as a mechanic back in those funny car racing days of Gene Snow. A very capable young driver who appeared to maybe have the Spring Nationals won this year when his parachute just fell out at half track. Now, Kenny Bernstein, recall, in round number 1, set low elapsed time for the funny cars at this event at 5:85. So Johnson has got a handful in the Budweiser King in the far lane. They leave right together, no noticeable hole shot, and they stay together at half track. It is Rick Johnson. Rick Johnson pulling ahead and winning it by a car length.
And Kenny Bernstein was unable to duplicate his 5:85. Rick Johnson moves into the semifinals where he will face Mark Oswald. John Force will be going against Don Prudhomme. Some of the most popular cars in all of drag racing, the Pro Stockers, the factory hot rods. Let's hear a little bit more about it. Steve Evans.
If watching these Pro Stock cars run, you get the impression that they're nothing more than warmed-over modified street machines. Nothing really could be further from the truth. The only thing that's left stock on this 1983 Ford Thunderbird of Ricky Smith is the roof and the quarter panels. Everything else is custom crafted. And because of all that sophistication, they're the most expensive car in drag racing to build. Also, a lot of people feel the most difficult to drive. Ricky has an awful lot of things to accomplish in just 7 seconds in this car. Let's go for an imaginary ride. The first thing Ricky's going to do is what you and I would do. He's going to turn the ignition switch on, hit a couple of electric fuel pumps, and start the engine. Now, Ricky moves his right hand to this maze of gear shift levers that control 3 individual overdrive-style transmissions. With this in the forward position and all of these in the forward position, Ricky is ready to stage. As he stages, he uses a hand brake to hold the car on the starting line. Holding it tight with the engine at about 8,500 RPM, the light turns green and Ricky is gone. Quickly as possible, he shifts into second gear, half track, third gear, three-quarter track, fourth gear, steering the car through the lights about 180 miles an hour. He depresses the clutch, pulls the parachute. The run is over. The Pro Stock car is a lot more complicated than it might appear, and quite a challenge to the men that drive them.
A wild ride by Bubba Corzine, but both Bubba and his Pontiac Firebird A-OK. These cars are very closely matched, very evenly matched in horsepower, in cubic inches, in weight, and we see just how close the racing can be. As they approach the finish line, it sometimes is just a matter of inches separating the two cars, determining who wins and who loses in this very popular Pro Stock category of championship drag racing competition.
And Dave, we pick up our Pro Stock coverage with the semifinals. Don Kuntz here in the near lane, Lee Shepard in the far lane. Now, Kuntz will also do a burnout, but it's a little different style. They have an electronic mechanism that locks the front brakes so the rear tires can spin free and heat up in the water area. Don Kuntz is from Cayuga, Indiana, driving this Chevrolet Camaro, and the highlight of his career had to be a hole-shot victory at the recent Spring Nationals over this man, Lee Shepard of Arlington, Texas, the famed Rear and Morrison Camaro, the two-time and current world champion.
Two Chevrolets matched in the semifinal round of racing here at the Summer Nationals. Very evenly matched. Again, 500 cubic inches maximum, 2,350 pounds. the total weight of the car, including the driver. So there's a lot of driver in this. There's also a lot of tuning ability. You will find the races much closer, possibly, than in other forms of competition. And a red light. This is where he took advantage, or tried to take advantage, of the starting line and failed. Lee Shepherd moves into the finals of the Summer Nationals.
And so many drivers will red light against this man. They just have to gamble occasionally. A 788 wins it. And here is Butch Leal going farther in competition than he has in at least a year. Butch Leal from Southern California, formerly called the California Flash. Now I guess it'd be the Ohio Flash as he's in Columbus. This man, the local driver, Frank Iaconio, Totowa, New Jersey.
Number 2 in the world last year was Frank Iaconio, and he has set his sights in 1983 to win the Winston World Championship. But there's a lot standing in his way, and right now it is Butch Leal in the Rod Shop Pontiac. 500 cubic inches each. Gasoline-burning engines, and Frank Iaconio by several car lengths takes the win. His speed over 177 miles an hour. His elapsed time, 7.80 seconds. As Frank Iaconio moves into the finals against Lee Shepherd, we're getting set for the semi-final round of racing in funny cars. It'll be Don the Snake Prudhomme in the Pepsi Challenger against the Mountain Dew car of John Force. Steve had a chance to talk with Don earlier about the Christmas tree.
He said that if you see the green light, you're late.
You heard right. Yeah, that's exactly right. When they say, you know, you're not supposed to leave till the green's on, but if you do see it, you're absolutely right. You're late. The car needs to be accelerating by the time you see amber, because by the time it turns green, you're in motion where you hit the lights at the exact right time.
Nobody knows better than Don Prudhomme, but John Force will be trying to pull off the upset here. Prudhomme, the veteran, with more nitro-burning wins to his credit than any other driver in history.
And I can tell you that John Force literally idolizes this man. We'll hope someday to possibly have even a fraction of the number of wins that Don does. John Force has been cutting very, very good lights throughout this season, has been first off the mark many, many times. The Snake in the near lane, John Force in the far lane. A battle of the soft drink brands here in the semifinals at the Summer Nationals. Force finally stages. Now Prudhomme is in. They are set. I can't tell who left first. They were right together. John Force, however, is running away from his idol on this one. It is John Force winning it at a 6:02, 247 miles an hour.
Steve, the start looked very good for both cars. It looked like they left the line almost simultaneously. And again, we're dealing in hundredths of a second. See if you can pick it out here in the replay. It was John Force moving just a fraction of a second earlier. But where he made up the distance was in the first several hundred feet at a car length lead at this point. And John Force carried it through for the win as our final pair of cars in the semifinal round, Mark Oswald against Rick Johnson.
Rick Johnson, the custom body car from Utica, New York, as we mentioned earlier, very popular with the fans here. They see it on many, many Saturday nights during the summer racing season. The number 1 qualifier, Mark Oswald, the blue Candies and Hughes car from South Louisiana. Mark Oswald, who was in the winner's circle here a year ago, driving Paul Candy's top fuel dragster.
A green light start for both cars, and it's Mark Oswald pulling ahead. Something wrong with Rick Johnson's car, and Oswald goes through at a 595 at over 243 miles an hour, while Rick Johnson has pulled off the track into the grass, and he had some problems. He wanted to get off the track just in case it might be leaking oil, and Johnson comes out through the escape hatch. The fans themselves seeking relief from the heat. It's over 95 degrees here at Raceway Park. A chance to talk with Gary Beck.
What happened was the oil pressure of the engine dropped after the burnout. I had good oil pressure starting the engine and in the burnout and backing up, and it was fluctuating a little bit, and then a little dry hop, and we had zero oil pressure. I mean, zero, not 20 pounds or 40 pounds, but zero.
And zero oil pressure will not get you into the semifinals, where we find Gene Snow against Joe Amato. Texas versus Pennsylvania. If you want to root for your favorite state, if you want to root for your favorite driver, Gene Snow, of course, the veteran. Joe Amato moving up through the ranks, and now his second year in Top Fuel racing.
So it's Joe Amato and Gene Snow. These are 2-speed transmissions in these cars. About half track they'll shift. So far it is Joe Amato. Gene Snow is right there with him. And suddenly Snow fades. It is Joe Amato going into his second consecutive NHRA final round.
And as you watch the start, you see that both cars almost simultaneously are off the line together. At this point, just a few feet is the lead for Joe Amato, but at the finish line, the snowman melted and Joe Amato moves into the final. Here comes Connie Coletta. His competition is Jody Smart from San Antonio, Texas, doing their burnouts together.
So one of these men will face Joe Amato in the final round. Will it be Jody Smart, who coasts on down the racetrack? You know, they don't want to stop these cars too quickly, David, because occasionally the fuel will rush away from the pump and cause the car to die. And that has happened quite a few times to Jody Smart, so he's very cautious about that now.
Connie Coletta doing a shorter burnout, backing up down in the shutdown area, getting set to head to the pits to work his car over before the final round is Joe Amato. And Joe very happy with his second in a row final round appearance at an NHRA championship event.
Dave, Connie Coletta is very anxious. He's motioning to the starter, get Jody Smart up here. I'm ready. Jody Smart, who took a long time in the burnout, as we explained why he stopped the car so slowly. Coletta is not happy at all. Finally, they are staged and ready. Jody Smart is in.
And the motor explodes on Connie Coletta's car. The car going sideways and trailing oil. You can see it just coming out of the engine and the flames underneath the car. Connie, I am sure, realizes that it's rather warm. Jody Smart shuts it off. He goes on through and takes the win and turns off. But for Connie Coletta, a tremendous engine explosion. The fire still burning. The NHRA safety safari crew getting onto the scene, and out comes Coletta of the car. I have a feeling his backside a bit scorched at this moment.
I think he felt the fire on that one, even though the engine is the rear of the car. Coletta inspecting the damage, and he's going to find that it is severe. It's been a long time since I've seen a fire like that right in the starting line area. Coletta is still hot. Now, here is where we first noticed that Coletta was in a hurry, a man in a hurry. He wants Jody Smart up there, staged and ready. But, you know, David, Jody Smart does the same thing every round. Here you see the pressure. Coletta had too much heat in the motor. Jody Smart always does that long burnout. Always the crews talk before they start the cars as to what each is going to do. I really can't understand Coletta's problem here. It appeared that his crew got in too much of a hurry.
He just let the clutch out and hit the accelerator pedal, and the motor literally exploded on the starting line in a ball of fire. The flames trailing out from beneath the car as the oil finally expends itself in his Coletta Flying Services entry. But Connie had a handful just to keep the car headed in a semblance of a straight direction.
So Connie Coletta, in fact, the explosion so violent, we're told that it blew the cylinder heads right there. Is where it blew the cylinder head right up off the block. So this is all the oil and fuel in the motor being ignited at the same time.
We talk about 2,500 horsepower in these engines. Well, you see it now being directed in exactly the wrong directions. This is not what one wants. Steve Gibbs, the competition director for NHRA, and Connie Coletta, the driver, locked in an intense conversation on the starting line about the principles of staging and who should not stage first. Connie, a longtime competitor, and Steve Gibbs, also a longtime official.
Well, it appears it's falling on deaf ears because, as I mentioned earlier, Jody Smart always does the same thing.
We get set now for the finals in all of our professional categories. We'll start off with Pro Stock Eliminator, a classic battle of two of the best Chevrolets in the country. In the near lane, the hometown favorite. From Totowa, New Jersey, comes Frank Iaconio.
Well, the number one car is in the far lane. The world champion Lee Shepard, the famed Ruren Morrison Camaro from Arlington, Texas. From New Jersey, as you said, Dave, Frank Iaconio. These two have battled many, many times. Frank Iaconio with a win here could have an awful good shot at the world championship. He's got that win. There is a red light in the Texans' lane. Lee Shepard has left too soon. Ignore the car across the finish line first. Your winner is Frank Iaconio with an elapsed time of 7.85 seconds, 177 miles an hour.
Steve, this crowd just went crazy. When you see the red light flash in replay, you know what the crowd did, because this is basically a New Jersey, New York crowd here at Englishtown, and their hometown favorite just upset the reigning Winston World Champion for the Pro Stock Championship. Backing up after their burnouts, the funny car finals. Mark Oswald in the near lane in the Candice and Hughes car. John Force in the Mountain Dew Jolly Rancher Derviner Schnitzel Special is in the far lane.
So looking to be in the winner's circle 2 consecutive years, but in different categories, is Mark Oswald. John Force made a final round here about 4 years ago, only to lose to Don Prudhomme. What a turnaround for John Force. Since hiring Larry Frazier, his crew chief, there at the front of the car, Force has been running better than ever. It has all come down to this. About $25,000 on the line and valuable Winston World Championship points, the Funny Car Final.
For Mark Oswald and the Candies and Hughes car, noted for its top-end charge, for coming from behind if necessary, and just eating up the asphalt in the last half of the quarter mile. John Force and Mark Oswald move together. It appears to be Force ahead at the point in the mid-track, and it is Mark Oswald winning it at over 251 miles an hour.
So for a parting shot, it is Oswald at 592, and you were so right, Dave. The big top-end charge made all the difference.
Here we watch in replay as both cars locked in a head-to-head struggle as they leave the starting line. At this point, it's anybody's race. At this point, Mark Oswald making his charge and taking the win as Mark Oswald, for the second year in a row, is in the winner's circle at the Summer Nationals in Englishtown, New Jersey.
Mark Oswald already receiving congratulations as the Summer Nationals Funny Car champion. His second consecutive national event title in only his first year as a funny car driver. You'll remember he won here a year ago at the Summer Nationals in another category. No stranger to the winner's circle here is Mark Oswald. Mark going over to congratulate John Force on a beautiful final round. Very, very close racing. But for Force, his first national event still remains just slightly beyond his grasp.
The pressure showing in the winner's face. Earlier, Steve paid a visit to Jody Smart's pit area.
The one piece of equipment a driver hopes he never has to use during the course of a race is the engine hoist. But in the Jody Smart camp, a fresh bullet being installed in the frame rails of his top fuel dragster. Crew Chief J.E. Christic, the man sweating so profusely in the yellow shirt, found a burned rod bearing in the motor that has so successfully taken them to the final round. With a crankshaft problem, you don't dare run that engine. It's just not safe for the driver or anybody around. So J.E. Christic winches the spare engine into Jody Smart's car. They have absolutely no idea how this motor will perform, but they will put the same fuel system off the other engine, the blower, the injectors, and that is really kind of the heart of the motor.
There's only one way to find out if these motors work or not, and that is to try them down a quarter of a mile. The time you don't want to try them out is in the final round of a championship drag racing event like the NHRA Summer Nationals. In the near lane is Joe Amato. He's the crowd favorite. He's from Pennsylvania. Old Forge, his hometown, a suburb of Philadelphia. In the far lane, the Texas Thunder of Jody Smart. Both cars stage, a good start, and Jody Smart going up in smoke. Too much horsepower, and Joe Amato, for the second major event in a row, has won the Top Fuel Eliminator title and has picked up a major points lead as he has advanced his standings in the Winston World Championship points chase. Joe Amato, the winner of the Summer Nationals, and he does it as you watch again Jody Smart going up in smoke and losing traction. Joe Amato is the winner.
Joe Amato wins his second consecutive national event. Has now got to rate right up there with the Gary Becks and the Shirley Muldownies. Was there any point where you're concerned down the racetrack?
No, the minute the car left it didn't shake, and I was out 100 feet. I knew I didn't see Jody at all. I knew I had a good race going. Then when I got in high gear, he makes a big top end charge. I was just hoping nothing, sometimes you could blow the motor, he could come by you. The minute I didn't see him coming, and it was just buzzing along. It really made a good move.
And a good move was made by Joe Amato to take the win at the NHRA Summer Nationals. Our congratulations to all of the champions that participated in this outstanding event. Mark Oswald, your funny car champ. Frank Iaconio, the champion in Pro Stock. For Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClelland, saying so long from Englishtown, New Jersey, and the NHRA Summer Nationals Drag Racing Championship. This has been a Diamond V Sports presentation.